Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel for another video. First off, I just want to say that we are super excited about the uptick in traffic over the last couple of weeks, which is to say that if you're new here, welcome. I hope you enjoy. I hope you decide to subscribe. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. I should also quickly introduce myself. My name is Joey. For the last year or so, I've been helping Sam on the editing side of things. I know Sam and our other editor and good friend Bach from undergrad. I do not have a music degree. I am not a professional musician. I'm just a guy who loves music and also reading and writing, and I'm going to try my best to connect those things and hopefully spark an interest in music and how it works in some people who might not otherwise have considered it. So all that out of the way, let's just get right into it. Okay, so in my last video, I tried to make the case that we, as a culture, especially young people, should set aside more time to listen to music, and that when we do this, we should try to do it with the goal of trying to learn something from it. So today, I'm going to introduce what I think is a good starting point for developing an ear for how music works and what it's trying to do, and that is with cadences. I'm going to lay out what cadences are, and then go over a couple of examples so that you can hear what I mean, and then I'm going to quickly talk about why I think this is relevant even for someone who doesn't actually play music. Okay, so very briefly, what is a cadence? From a technical standpoint, a musical cadence is the end of a musical phrase that creates a sense of resolution. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about harmonic cadences today, which can just be defined as a progression of two or more, usually two or three, chords that conclude a phrase, section, or piece of music. Okay, so this will make a lot more sense once you hear a few of these, but hopefully it's starting to sink in from the definition that cadences essentially act as musical punctuation. Maybe this is obvious, but most often it's comparable to a period because it marks the end of something, but cadences are often used in other more subtle ways as well, which might be more comparable to a comma or a colon. And keep in mind that this is not a perfect one-to-one comparison, and it can't be, because music, not the lyrics, but the actual sounds that are being played, is already expression in its most abstract form. The words to describe these sounds, and even the images we use to notate them, are secondary to the patterns we discovered and created organically over time. And this is good news, because it means that these patterns can be recognized by anyone who pays attention to them, even if they don't have the exact words to describe them yet. But I don't want to get sidetracked. Let's go over some of this stuff with some actual examples. Okay, so I'm just going to play this first example so that we can go nice and slow. So to start with, let's establish what key we're playing in. And in order to keep things simple, let's say we're playing in C major. C major is the simplest key to use because the notes of the C major scale are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then back to C. This is just all the white keys on the piano. Okay, so we've established our key, and the way we did that was by playing a C major chord, which is just made up of the notes C, E, and G played together in any order. These different orders of the notes of the chord, so like C, E, G, E, G, C, G, C, E, and so on, are called inversions, but that isn't important right now. What is important is that every note of the C major scale has other notes that are combined with it, just like we did to create our C major chord, and this is done by stacking thirds on top of the note we are using to create the chord. This bottom note is known as the root note of the chord. All of these chords are made up of the root, the third, and the fifth, and together, these 7 chords, one chord built off of each note of the C major scale, make up the diatonic chords of C major. Notice that some of these chords are major and others are minor, and that the B chord, the 7th scale degree, is a diminished chord, meaning it has a flat third and a flat fifth. Using the letter names for these chords can get pretty confusing, so we can instead just use numbers. C is 1 because that's what key we're in, making it the 1st scale degree. D is 2 because it's the 2nd scale degree. E is 3, F is 4, and so on. And the way we notate this is with Roman numerals. Notice that the major chords are notated with uppercase numerals, while minor chords are notated with lowercase numerals. Okay, so now we have our key, and we have a list of chords to choose from that will fit within our key of C major without breaking any rules. So this whole time, we've just been hearing a C major chord, and it's starting to get a little bit old. So let's move to another chord in our list. How about E minor, the 3 chord? Now we can hang out in E minor for a little bit, but in order for this to be a pattern, we'll need to come back to C major. We need to come back home to the tonic, to the key we're in. This is not true every single time. These rules get broken in every way you can imagine, but for this example, let's just say it is. Okay, so let's play our new progression a little faster so you can get a feel for what it sounds like. Notice that it's very obvious when we move away from home, when we move away from C major, and when we return back to it, but it feels more like it's oscillating, or maybe kind of hovering. We never hear anything that indicates to us that this switching back and forth should come to an end, that the musical thought is complete. Remember too that end here doesn't mean the end of the song. It can also indicate that it's time to move to a new pattern, or that the current pattern is now going to start over. So how is this problem solved? This move from the 1 chord to the 3 chord is very common, it doesn't break any rules, and it actually sounds quite nice, partly because these 2 chords share 2 common notes, E and G. Well, one way this can be done is to add another chord between the E minor chord that has been introduced and the C major chord that we need to return to. And by doing this, we create a harmonic cadence. In this case, we'll add the 4 chord, F major, between the E minor chord and the C major chord. And because these chords are being played in a cycle, this movement from the 4 chord back home to the 1 chord forms our first type of cadence called a plagal cadence. Notice how much more satisfying and musical the movement between the chords feels. Our tonic, C major, feels much more like home, and it feels a lot better to return back to it because we're being sort of led to it by this 4 chord. This feeling of tension and then resolution is the fundamental basis of music. And books, and movies, and TV shows, you get the idea. And this isn't like a party trick or something. This move from the 4 chord back to the 1 chord has been used to indicate the end of a musical thought for hundreds of years, and it's used all the time today. If we just add another chord to this example I've made, in this case the 6 chord, A minor, it's just the theme of The Office. Here's a plagal cadence in a piano work by Claude Debussy. Notice how the use of the plagal cadence here provides momentum to the piece as a whole by providing a sense of closure to this opening section. This feeling of momentum is really clear in this series of plagal cadences used in Hallelujah. And the same cadence in the same key is then used at the end of this section to provide a sense of closure, of finality. And we see this in all kinds of music, not just classical music. Here are a couple of examples. Forgive me, I know these songs aren't like the best thing you've ever heard, but what they lack in quality, they make up for in being royalty-free, so this is what we got. First, we have this little piano melody. This one is in the key of B major. Here's a plagal cadence used in this sort of punk rock thing. This one's in C major, like our original example. Here is the plagal cadence being used in a folk song. This one's in G major. Notice how we move to the 5 chord and then to the 1 chord before we move again to the 4 chord and then back to the 1 chord. This movement from 5 to 1 is important, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Here's a really good example of a plagal cadence providing a very obvious end to a section of this song. This one's in C sharp major. Notice how long we stay stuck on that 4 chord, the F sharp, which builds and builds and builds this kind of tension, which is then resolved when we finally get home and find the tonic again at C sharp major. Last example, this one is super cheesy. I know it sounds like the background to like an HR training video, but listen to how these quick plagal cadences push the song forward and give it momentum. Okay, so hopefully these examples were different enough from each other that the feeling of the plagal cadence is starting to click with your ear a little bit, but if you're still feeling a little lost, that's okay. I think the other type of cadence I'm going to talk about today is a little easier to pick up on, and that's what we're going to talk about now. So remember from a minute ago that I mentioned this movement from the 5 chord to the 1 chord that we heard in one of our examples. This movement from 5 to 1 is called an authentic cadence, and the name sort of gives it away, but this is not only the most easily recognizable cadence, it is also the fundamental basis of all Western music. To To take its definition from the Harvard Dictionary of Music, this cadence is a microcosm of the tonal system and is the most direct means of establishing a pitch as tonic. It is virtually obligatory as the final structural cadence of a tonal work. And remember that tonal work, in this case, is not only referring to classical music. Every genre you can think of, any time period, any artist, any music that you can find is going to be littered with these authentic cadences. Here's what it sounds like by itself. We're just going to stay in the key of C major like we did for our Plagal cadence walkthrough. Here's an authentic cadence with a little more context. This is a really common one you'll hear in a lot of music you hear like on the radio and also in a lot of classical pieces. In jazz, a lot of times, instead of a 4-5-1, you'll hear a 2-5-1. So here's what that sounds like. And in order to get that really jazzy feel, these chords will usually be played with extensions, which I don't have time to go into right now, but here's an example of what that might sound like. Here's an example of a series of authentic cadences in the first movement of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony. Here's an example of an authentic cadence being used in a hip-hop beat. Here's another song that sounds like an HR training video, but the 5-1 cadence is really obvious here. And we can also hear it in a heavier context in this guitar riff thing. Okay, so at this point we've covered the two most common cadences that you're most likely to come across. There are a bunch of other types of cadences, but I don't think it's going to be super helpful to cover those in a video like this. Hopefully the examples I covered give you at least a little bit of a sense of what I mean when I call cadences musical punctuation. If you've made it this far and you're not someone who plays an instrument, or if this is the first time you're hearing about these, first of all, thank you for sticking with it. But you might be thinking to yourself, like, why should I care about this? And this is a fair question. I don't think memorizing the terms I've been using is going to be very helpful, at least not at first. And I know people kind of dunk on music theory for being a bunch of fancy, made-up words, and I get it. But if you're interested in developing your ear and trying to get better at listening, it is so helpful to be able to pick out certain elements and recognize what they sound like and what they feel like. And this is also why it's so important to spend time actually listening to music. The first step to being able to recognize these things is to have them pointed out and named. But the second part of that is being able to recognize them in context, in actual songs that you like. And especially at first, I don't think it's that important to have all the correct vocabulary ready to go off the top of your head. The important thing is just to listen and pay attention as much as you can and let these things kind of jump out at you as you get better at hearing them. And remember that cadences are only one part of it. I think it's a great place to start. That's why I decided to talk about them first. But there are a ton of concepts like this, and they're all related in some way or another. And once you start to sort of string them together, that's when you really start to get a full picture of what a song is trying to do, and that's when it really starts to get fun. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I really hope you got something out of this. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any questions at all, or if you think of anything that you'd want to hear about in a future video, be sure to say hi in the comments. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you again next time.